Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am your host, Vortex from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And if you're new to the channel, what we do here is create weekly videos teaching people how to produce music. Our goal here is to get as many people producing music as possible, and the best way to start making music is on an iOS device. So if you do want to help us out on our mission, make sure to smash those likes, subscribe, and share out the show. Now in today's video, we're going to be showing you guys a couple of different tips and tricks to help you better process your bass. The fundamentals of these techniques can be applied to virtually any genre and work in almost any DAW. Now, oftentimes in mixes, especially from new producers, the bass can often sound very muddy and inconsistent, and is really a common problem area. These techniques can help to tighten up your bass sounds and help your bass sit better and be more present in the overall mix. I often try to remind new producers that while the bass sound may sound really good initially when you first put it into the sequencer, but once you start adding synths, pads, guitars, drums, and all the other things that comes within a song, the bass sound can really easily get lost in the overall mix. So in addition to making sure that your bass sounds good, you also have to think about how it's going to sound once everything else is added in. Again, every part of the song does have to live in its own frequency range so that every single instrument, in addition to just the vocals, can be heard clearly in the mix. And so, without further ado, let's get right into showing you how to process bass inside Cubasis 3. Alright, welcome everybody. We are wishing you the happiest of the happiest from Mobile Music Pro to wherever you are in the world. Now, the first thing that we are going to cover in this video is just your standard first pass processing and treatment. And then after that, we'll get into some more advanced techniques such as serial compression. Now, you can achieve similar results with things like multiband compressors and other fancy plugins, but we are going to just stick with mostly stock plugins here for this video. Plus, splitting up your bass into multiple frequency tracks, instead of using a bunch of fancy plugins, in my opinion, is going to get you the biggest and best response for your bass. There's really nothing that can mess up an overall mix faster than an inconsistent low end with the bass being too loud or too quiet sometimes. So let's go ahead and get started with some of these basic processing techniques. We will throw on the headphones here first. Okay, as you can see, we do have our project pulled up here inside of Cubasis 3, and it is pretty much just a simple 8-bar loop here. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like, and we'll also solo out the bass for you, so you can hear what that sounds like as well. Alright, and as you can hear, it is a very simple track here, a very simple project. We just have these 5 different tracks inside of here. We have the kick, the snare, and the hats, and then we have our bass guitar, and then our sub bass. Our bass guitar is using a built-in instrument inside of Cubasis 3 using the Microsonic and the double bass preset. And our bass sign is also using a built-in preset. We're using the double sign bass preset inside of the micro loop, which is the built-in synth inside of Cubasis 3. So let's close out of that now. So now let's go ahead and begin applying our initial treatment. So what we're going to do is select our bass guitar track, and we are going to solo this track so we can hear what it sounds like after we're done applying all of our effects. And you'll notice over here inside of every single track that by default, Cubasis 3 does add a channel strip and studio EQ with default settings. So the first thing we are going to do is enable our channel strip, and we'll go ahead and hit the E to bring up its settings. And what we're going to do is go down to the channel strip here, and we're going to choose a factory preset, and we're going to find our electric bass guitar preset here. So we'll scroll down a bit to the E's. There we go. Let's go ahead and choose electric bass guitar 1. And once we're done with that, the next thing we're going to do is apply our studio EQ. So we'll first enable that here, and we'll bring up the settings with the E button here, and we'll select our studio EQ, and then select Factory Presets. And once again, we will search for our bass preset here. Let's search for bass 1. Here we go. Now, of course, we are using a virtual instrument here, but if you were using a real bass and having some inconsistencies with the highs and the lows, you can add an additional compressor here. So we'll tap to add effect, and then we'll go to our internal effects, and we can select compressor, go to our factory presets here, and we can scroll down to some of our Tighten presets here. So if we look down here, we can see a couple of these presets like Tight Mix Bus, Tight and Heavy Kit, and Tightener. I find that the Tightener preset really does help a lot with recorded guitars, especially if they're recorded through amps as opposed to direct input. But again, since we are using a virtual instrument here, we won't need this, so let's go ahead and remove this now by tapping on compressor, going back, and tapping on none. And let's go ahead and solo the difference here. We'll hit play. Okay, so we can already hear a pretty big difference there. We're already getting a much fatter and deeper sound, and it's already starting to sound a bit more crisp as well. So let's re-enable these here and move on to our next track. This time we're going to take a look at our sub-bass track here. And once again, this is using the double sine bass preset here inside of the Microloop synthesizer. So just like before, we'll apply our initial treatment here. So we'll enable the channel strip and go to the settings. And we'll need to get to our presets here, so we'll tap on channel strip and go to factory presets. And this time we're going to search for Electric Bass Guitar 3. So we'll scroll down to our E's once more. Now again, you can use any one of these. It's really up to your own personal tastes, but I do like Electric Bass Guitar 3. You can see it does add a little bit of drive in the saturation as well. So let's close out of this. And just like before, we'll apply our Studio EQ next. So let's enable this by tapping on the power button on the far left, and open up its settings by tapping on the E. We'll tap on Studio EQ, and then go to Factory Presets. And where before we chose bass 1 for a preset, let's this time choose bass 2. You can see here the differences between bass 1 and bass 2. They're essentially designed to allow you to have two basses and have them both sit well within the mix. So for our first bass track, we did choose bass 1, and now we're going to choose bass 2. And let's close out of that. And let's go ahead and solo these differences. So just like before, we will engage and disengage these plugins. So once again, making a pretty big difference there, adding a bunch more roundness to the low end, and overall thickening up the sound. Like we've said in many different videos, it's not any one single plugin or any one single technique that makes a good mix. It really is just 1,000 different little things stacked on top of each other. Okay, now that we have applied our initial plugins for our bass treatment, the next thing that we want to do to make sure that these stand out in the mix is to apply some panning. So let's go to our mixer here. And we're going to apply our bass guitar about 32 to the left here, 32% or so. Yeah, 33 is fine. And then for our sub bass, we will pan that about the same here, 32 or 33 to the right. And now this will help widen out our bass sound, again to make sure that it is heard more clearly and be more present inside the mix. Okay, now that we have applied all of our initial treatment, let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like in the context of the entire mix. Alright, already sounding much better there. You can definitely hear the bass be a lot thicker and a lot more rounded out. You can now really hear that bass guitar cut through the mix. So definitely make sure that you listen to the difference between this version and what we had earlier in the video. Now, of course, in an ideal situation, you would want to be a little bit more surgical with your EQs. But these initial presets that do come with Cubasis 3 do make it extremely easy to get a great sounding first mix. And now we're going to show you a technique called serial processing or serial compression. Now, this particular technique can be used on a wide variety of different instruments, including drums as well. But today we are just going to show you that on our bass guitar track. So let's go ahead and get into that now. So we have our exact same project pulled up just like before, and the first thing that we're going to do is duplicate our bass guitar track. So we'll make sure that our track is selected here, and we'll tap on our duplicate button, which is right next to our delete and add buttons at the bottom here. So we'll tap on that. And now we have our second bass guitar track here, which is an exact copy of our first bass guitar track. And what we're going to do is we're going to select our first track again, and then we'll select our Studio EQ, and let's reset this back to the Studio EQ default. So now we're on our default EQ preset, and we are going to EQ out the highs with a low pass or a high cut filter. So by default that is selected over here on the far right for the fourth band, and we're going to select that and drag that all the way over to around 200 Hz or so, right around there. And this will remove any frequencies that are above 200 Hz. And then for our second bass guitar track, we're going to do something similar, but in fact will be the exact opposite. So we'll select our second bass guitar track, and then select the Studio EQ once more. And let's reset this again by tapping on default. And this time we're going to EQ out all the lows below 200 Hz. Right around here. So now we have our first bass guitar track. If we tap on the Studio EQ, you can see we are cutting off all the high frequencies here. We'll adjust this just a little bit, making sure we are still around 200 Hz. And for our second guitar, we are removing all of the lows. Now you might be asking, why are we doing this? And the reason is so we can have much finer control over our bass guitar sound. And one of the main reasons we do that is so that we can apply effects at different frequency ranges. So for example, if you wanted to apply something like a delay or a reverb, you would definitely not apply that on the lower frequencies, and in fact instead would apply that on the higher frequency ranges. And another great example of that would be in the trap or hip hop world, where they tend to apply a lot of distortion only in those higher frequency ranges, so that those 808s and those sub basses can be heard on a much wider range of devices such as your iPhone or iPad. So once again, this technique is applied in a multitude of different genres. So the next thing we're going to do here is apply our compressors. So we'll go to our first track and we're going to add a compressor here by going down to Internal Effects and selecting Compressor. Now we are on our first track here, which means we are going to only affect the lower frequencies, so we don't need to be applying too much compression here. So let's go to maybe a 1:3 ratio. There we go. And let's set this attack really quick so we can grab all the frequencies here, maybe around 5 or 10 ms. And we do want to hold on to these frequencies for a while, so let's set the release a little bit later to around 80 ms. And we are going to drop our output here a little bit. We're just going to have a little bit of extra dB here, maybe 2 or 3 at the most. And now we'll go to our second bass guitar track, which again is only affecting the higher frequencies, and we'll tap to add effect. We'll go to Internal Effects and go to Compressor once more. Now this one is going to be a little bit different. We are actually going to smash this one a little bit harder here, so we're going to go to 20:1 ratio. And keep our MS a little bit higher here, around 50 ms, because we don't want to attack it right away, and we still want to hold on to those frequencies, so we'll leave that at 80 ms as well. And once again, we are only going to turn our output up just a little bit here, maybe 1 or 2 dB. Let's try 1.5, around 2. Let's try 2 dB. Okay, now let's close out of that. Now we're going to play this back in the context of the entire mix, and then after we do that, we'll go ahead and A/B some of these settings here. So let's hit play. Okay, perfect. Once again, making that bass guitar sound much more present and wider in the mix. So just to give you an idea what these sound like, let's go ahead and solo these different tracks. So we're going to solo the lower track first, the lower frequency bass track first. Now let's hear the higher frequency track. And like we said, it will give you more control over the bass, so if we tap our mixer, we can now adjust the volume for those individual frequencies. So we can turn up the highs a little bit more and reduce the lows, or vice versa. So let's solo these two together real quick. Alright, and now actually that we have these two bass guitars, we can pan them each differently. So let's go ahead and pan the other guitar to the right. We'll pan the higher frequency guitar to the right, and we'll hear what that sounds like. Alright, sounding very full, very round, and very present in the mix. Now, because we have separated these different frequencies out into different tracks, we can begin applying different effects. So for example, on the second track here, we can add a different effect. Let's go ahead and tap to add effect. Go to internal effects and see what we have here. Let's scroll down here to maybe a flanger. Yeah, let's try that. And we'll solo this to hear what this sounds like. Alright, let's maybe stick with this one because this one can kind of probably be easily heard. So let's hear what this sounds like with just the bass guitars. And within the context of the whole mix. Okay, very cool. Let's try something else, maybe a pan or a tremolo. So let's go back here. We'll go back one more time. And I think we're going to choose the FX Pack 1. No, let's choose the FX Pack 2. And we'll choose pan and tremolo. Let's solo this track to hear what it sounds like. And choose a few presets. Alright, let's choose the preset with the funny name, Flutter Butter, because it's also easier to be heard as well in the mix. So let's solo the two bass guitars. And now within the context of the mix. Alright, that is sounding very, very cool. And again, just a huge difference from where we started with absolutely no treatment whatsoever. And just a final tip here as well that we don't have time for in the video, which is also that you can do things like sidechain both those different tracks differently. So that, for example, in an electronic genre, you can sidechain that lower end bass to make room for that big heavy kick, while still keeping those higher frequencies nice and crispy and distorted. Really, the possibilities do start to become endless once you start separating out your instruments into their own separate frequencies. Alright, hello and welcome back everybody. We just wanted to thank you again so much for watching the video this far. We really hope that the examples in this video helped you better understand why processing and isolating these frequencies in their own separate ranges really does help to widen out your sounds. And remember, though we did show you these examples inside Cubasis, every single iOS DAW and desktop DAW as well does come with the ability to achieve these same processing results. And we'd also like to give you our usual disclaimer here in that this video wasn't designed to be the be-all, end-all, best way to process your bass. There's really no incorrect way to do a lot of these different processing techniques, it just all comes down to your personal preference and whatever you think sounds good. And also, if you did enjoy this video, we do have a bunch of these how to process videos right here on the channel, including videos like how to process drums, melodies, loops, and more, and even a video on parallel compression. And just another reminder, folks, about our upcoming 2-hour live stream special to celebrate our 1-year anniversary anniversary coming up right here on November 4th. It's going to be a great time, guys. We're going to give away a bunch of different copies of Cubasis 3. We're going to launch a bunch of different things. So definitely make sure to join us right there on Wednesday, November 4th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you do want to stay up to date with what the channel is doing, make sure to subscribe to our free mailing list on mobilemusicpro.com. And of course, if you are enjoying this content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. We really do love hearing your feedback and interacting with everybody in the comments. And so, until next time, everybody, keep talking music, and we'll see you later. And we also wanted to throw out our usual disclaimer in that this and we'd also like to throw out why can't I say the word throw out? And we'd also like to throw out our usual disclaimer in that this video wasn't designed to be the best all beat. Why can't I say that?